Hello, everybody. This is Pascal from Neutrality Studies, and today I would like to make a short video to go with you through two texts that I think complement each other quite well and should help us understand something about the mentality of the people who are running this war in Ukraine and where this whole journey is taking us. Because one of the basic problems we have is, of course, the constant lies, an onslaught of horrible kind of make believe that we have seen over the entirety of the war. But there are ways to try to discern what is actually happening and to get some truth out of things that are purely ideological. So I would like to do an analysis of what the two sides would like their respective audiences to believe, which is a technique that was used by Western scholars to analyze the Soviet Union. You know, the Soviet Union was notorious for being kind of it was very difficult to understand what was actually going on in the Politburo. So to understand from the outside what the process, the political process inside Moscow was, what scholars did is they looked at the Pravdas and like all the publications by um, official media, and then try to infer what we can believe from something like whatever it is that you're looking at being printed, right? Because it meant something. Like anything that was printed was deemed to be printable, was allowed to be printed, and therefore we could infer something about the state of the political process in the Soviet Union. Now, today we are at exactly that point in the West where we need to start to understand where the power elites or the construct that we have seen emerge, right, where the media and politicians basically work hand in hand of doing political messaging in a constant way, where we, in order to kind of get around all of the not necessarily lies, but the make believe that they want to send to us in order to understand where reality is. Now, you know, I do still subscribe to like the New York Times and other outlets because I need to know what these people want me to believe in order to do that analysis. Now, one of the outlets that I'm still following and that I'm very sad for where it is Foreign Affairs. I get updates from them every week or so. They send me these emails, and Foreign Affairs used to be a great magazine, or I would say I believe that it was a great magazine, but maybe I should review that again. But they had Foreign Affairs is a very old magazine, 100 years old, and they had some of the greatest articles that were really impactful in international relations. I mean, one of them, look at this here. The source of Soviet conduct. That's George Kennan. That's George Kennan's famous long telegram, and it was published here in Foreign Affairs. I mean, this piece of writing defined a lot of United States foreign policy toward the Soviet Union for decades to come, and it's good analysis. George Kennan is a good analysis. George Kennan was also against NATO enlargement because he knew exactly what this would do to Russia, but that's a different story. I mean, there were articles like this one from Cambodia's Prince Norodom Sihanouk, who was the king of Cambodia at the time, who said, look, Cambodia needs to be neutral in order to escape the warfare in Vietnam. This article is from 1958, and of course it didn't go down that route, but you get the message, right? This magazine used to carry um, very important this magazine used to carry very important articles by thought leaders and actual policymakers, and still does so today. I mean, also Olaf Scholz's Zeitenwende was published here. I mean, this is a outlet for um, U.S. grand strategy and, you know, Western grand strategy thinking, and it is a main outlet of defining also policy. So when something is in here by officials, then it is worth of being taken note of. And what they published on the 14th of December this year is a text by Dmytro Kuleba, with the title "There is a Path to Victory in Ukraine: The Delusions and Dangers of Defeatist Voices in the West." This article also deserves attention because Dmytro Kuleba is actually the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, right? So it's another one of these high stakes, high level outputs. And Dmytro Kuleba has been in the political process in Ukraine for a while. You can see that also from the list of publications that he has here in Foreign Affairs. And it would be almost comical if it wasn't so sad, but just look at the titles here in April 2021, April 21, 2020. The peril of polling in Crimea. The foreign minister of Ukraine casts doubt on a poll in Crimea that suggests broad support for Russian annexation. All right. You didn't want to believe what the Russian poll said. Fine, okay, good. But then it gets harder and harder. August 2nd, 2021, before the war, half a year before the war started, Ukraine is part of the West. All right. December 11, 2021, 2 months before the war started. Don't sell out Ukraine. I mean, again, pleading for help from the West, right? June 17th, after the war started, how Ukraine will win. Yeah, that aged quite well, didn't it? April 25th, 2023, earlier this year. Why NATO must admit Ukraine? Well, that one didn't age that well, did it? And well, today there is a path to victory for Ukraine, and that's this one. Now, again, what we don't need to read this article to just believe what Mr. Kuleba tells us, but we need to read it in order to understand what he would like reality to be. And there's a very interesting twist toward the end, two interesting twists that need to be contrasted with what is happening. Let's go through the article now first. It starts with, as another winter of war arrives, voices skeptical of the country's prospects are growing louder, not in diplomatic meetings or military planning sessions, but rather in news reports and in expert commentary. Sorry. So he's saying in the military planning boards, there's no doubt that Ukraine can win, but public perception, as we know, we see that right now, right? In even in mainstream media, that there's doubt about Ukraine. So Mr. Kuleba is obviously writing against this doubt, the foreign minister, right? He has to write against this doubt. The pessimism, buttressed by supposedly pragmatic arguments, carries clear strategic implications that are both dangerous and wrong. Okay. Anyone who says that Ukraine is not having a great time right now and is probably going to lose the war, that's dangerous and wrong. Okay, and then Mr. Kuleba sets out to tell us why that is. The skeptics are correct that our recent counteroffensive did not achieve the lightning fast liberation of occupied land. Okay, as I said last week, this is undeniable at this point. This has been denied for 5 months, and now it's undeniable. So even Mr. Kuleba needs to phrase it this way, but he phrases it as in, not yet. Not yet. I mean, it's coming, just not yet. So, and then of course the article says the expectations were overblown, but pessimism is unwarranted, and it would be a mistake to let defeatism shape our policy decisions going forward. Instead, policymakers in Washington and other capitals should keep the big picture in mind and stay on track. Now, what is the big picture? The big picture is the liberation of every square mile of territory, and that requires enormous sacrifice by our soldiers, but there is no question that victory is attainable. Apparently, there is no question about that. So the last almost 2 years, they put a big question mark on this goal, but according to him, there's no question. Actually, this is absolutely clear. Anyone who has a brain to think about knows that this is clear. That's what he tries to convey. Any outcome besides a clear defeat of Russia in Ukraine would have troubling implications, and not just for my country. It would cause a global disarray that would ultimately threaten the United States and its allies as well. Yada, yada, yada. We know this spiel very much, right? Ukraine is defending not just itself, but the democracy. If Ukraine loses, democracy loses, and Russia will invade everything up until Spain and probably then go to the United States and defend and invade the US and invade everything, and everything's going to be a dictatorship, and Ukraine is the only firewall that stands between absolute autocratic doom and chivalry and democracy, the light, the shining light of democracy. The Ukraine that canceled its 2023 election, that kind of democracy that imprisons all of these opposition leaders and pacifists and so on. That democracy. Strategy of victory. Wars of this scale are fought in stages, says the foreign minister. Some of those stages may be more successful than others. Okay, okay. So currently we're not seeing a losing of Ukraine. We're just seeing a less successful stage. And of course, you know what's going to come, right? Um, he will tell us that the Kharkiv offensive was so fantastic, right? Although our objectives will not be reached overnight, continued international support for Ukraine will, over time, ensure that local counteroffensives achieve tangible results on the front lines, gradually destroying Russian forces and thwarting Putin's plans to protracted war. This has nothing to do anymore with any kind of strategy. This is just like pure fantasy, and okay, just we need to do more of the same, and we can expect that everything gets better. I mean, what we have been doing over the last 2 years hasn't rendered the result we wanted. So if we just do more of the same, we can expect that it will get us the results. This is like literally what Einstein said, is that insanity is about always doing the same and expecting different results. Now, our objectives will remain military feasible as long as three factors are in place. Now come the three factors. This is important. Adequate military aid, including jets, drones, so basically, more wonder weapons. The rapid development of industrial capacity, and a principled and realistic approach to the prospect of negotiations with Russia. Those are the three things. Wonder weapons, wonder industry, that has to be pop out of nothing, and a principled approach to negotiations. And I was quite hopeful when I read principled approach to negotiations, because I thought it meant that it signals that he's open for negotiation. As it turns out, down there he says like a principled approach means no negotiations and only like the only thing that can be acceptable is like Russia completely gone and everything back. Yeah. That's a principled approach. Ukraine has achieved notable results in recent months. We won the battle for the Black Sea. And honestly, I must say, I've read that before. I don't know what they're referring to. This is insane. I mean, obviously, the Black Sea is controlled by Russia. I don't know what he means with won the battle for the Black Sea, because they sunk the Moskva, that battleship of the Russians. Is that what they're referring to? I mean, Russia still controls the Black Sea. I don't know what this is supposed to be. So I think this is just made up, one of these nonsense thingies that keep repeating in the West, like Russia that attacked Georgia in 2008. That is being repeated. That was repeated even by Olaf Scholz in this very magazine. And we know the first shots were shot by the Georgians, by Saakashvili. This is an established fact. But somehow you can, if you keep claiming something, then it's supposed to stick. We've made gains on the southern front, recently securing a bridgehead on the eastern bank of the Dnieper River. This is what Mr. Kuleba in this publication on the 14th of December sells as a great advancement, right? Having a bridgehead on the eastern bank of the Dnieper River. I will come back to this in a moment, right? But keep this in mind. Against all odds, Ukrainian forces have liberated more than half the territory taken by Russia since February 2022. So here again, he tries to sell this common narrative that the way that the Russia advanced at the very beginning, when in the first stage of the war, when Russia tried to scare Ukraine into finally signing that neutrality agreement, that they wouldn't join NATO, which is what they wanted, that then the retreat of the Russians into more defensible positions, where they after that approach failed, and Mr. Boris Johnson and the West sabotaged the peace negotiations. That was the big victory, and that it was due to Ukraine's strength and Russia's weakness, and not due to the Russians actually trying to change the military strategy on the battleground, which is what they did. But okay, fine, let's give it to them. You're still proud that over a year ago you liberated all of these territories, and this is then supposed to tell us that never mind the current counteroffensive, that it failed. I mean, it just hasn't succeeded yet, right? Okay, that's the argument. Then the fallacy of negotiations. This is what I meant earlier. Mr. Kuleba doesn't want realistic negotiations with the Russians. He wants no negotiations. The problem is not just that the ceasefire now would reward Russian aggression instead of ending the war. A ceasefire would simply pause the fighting until Russia is ready to make another push inland. So he firmly opposes any negotiations at the moment that would lead to a stop of the fighting. The reality is that such negotiated ceasefire is not even on the table. This is interesting because this is true, because the Russians actually haven't offered to talk about a ceasefire, although Putin has said again and again that that negotiations are not halted on his side, and that it is the Volodymyr Zelensky who signed a decree outlawing any president of Ukraine, not just him, to negotiate with Russia. But it is true that at the moment there's no negotiations going on, and the way the war is going, it seems that Russia is determined to actually end it on its terms and not by talking. So I would say that this is not entirely wrong. Those who believe Russia will not attack a NATO country after celebrating success in Ukraine should recall how unimaginable a large-scale invasion of Ukraine seemed just 2 years ago. Here, and then we go back to scaremongering, right? That again, Russia will overrun the entirety of Europe and NATO if it's not stopped by Ukraine, right? So anyone saying that we should talk to the Russians is delusional. It's his argument. Supporting Ukraine is not a charity. Here he needs to point out that we managed to support in the most transparent and accountable way. US inspectors of military aid to Ukraine have found no evidence of significant waste, fraud, or abuse. This is so funny because it's absolutely laughable, because we know that all of those 100 billion or more than 100 billion of US dollar aid, I think it was Rand Paul who tried to introduce accountability measures, right? That there should be an office of accountability, and that was voted down by the US. And we know that we don't know where all of that money is going. That there's massive numbers of weapons actually unaccounted for, and that the Pentagon fails all of its audits and so on. Sorry for this. I need to switch that off. And yeah, so this is quite laughable, but it's interesting. So because that's where the argument goes, and then a little bit more, you you need to support Ukraine if to help yourself, right? Ukraine is the tip of the spear that is defending NATO. Blah 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 blah. Attempts by some skeptics to brand Ukraine's fight for freedom as just another futile forever war ignore these facts. Ukraine has never asked for American boots on the ground. Oh really? Oh really? I remember this incident when that Ukrainian rocket actually killed two Polish farmers because it went the other way, and immediately Mr. Zelensky actually said this was a Russian attack against Poland. You now have to invoke Article 5, and that was the moment when NATO actually got angry at Zelensky and told him shut up, because we know that NATO doesn't actually want its own war with Russia. It wants a war through Ukraine, it wants to have a proxy war. But as soon as Zelensky tried to actually steer up something, they said like, no, we don't. So saying that they didn't ask for NATO boots on the ground is like, okay, you tried everything you could, but you didn't get NATO boots on the ground. If democracy is allowed to fall in Ukraine, adversaries of the United States will perceive weakness and understand that aggression pays. Well, we talked about this already, right? And then a little bit more blah. What is it? Listen to Ukrainians. Oh yeah. This whole paragraph is just about how Ukrainians are right about Russians and how anyone else cannot really understand the intentions of the Russians. So please support the Ukrainians. Give them what they ask for. Allies at war. Now, this is the last two paragraphs, and they are quite interesting. So let's read them. At the end of last month, I attended a NATO ministerial meeting in Brussels. What struck me most was the disparity between the mood inside the chamber and the mood outside it. On the sidelines, reporters opened their question by asserting that the war had reached a stalemate and that war fatigue would cripple support, before wondering why Ukraine wouldn't offer to trade territory for peace. Yet, such defeatist narratives were absent in the official discussions, with ministers making a firm commitment to additional military aid and sustained support. However prevalent a false narrative of attrition becomes, we should not allow it to set policymaking and our shared strategy on a disastrous course. Isn't this fascinating? I don't know if he's speaking the truth or not. I don't know whether that's true, that actually in the situation room, in the meetings, he didn't get any tough questions, and that there's no doubt about Ukraine's ability to win. This might very well be a lie. If it's not, then it would be proof that there's an absolute disconnect, right, between public perception and public policy on the side of the EU and NATO. And if what he's saying is a lie, then it's kind of a last ditch effort of him to kind of sell the idea that this is not over. Now that Foreign Affairs then publishes this essay, and by the way, publishes it open access. A lot of their essays are not freely available. They're behind a paywall, but a couple of their essays are in front of the paywall. And obviously what this does is it increases circulation. More people can read it, like we can read it right now. So this also tells us that this is something that people want to push out, at least on certain levels. I don't know how far it goes. There's no conspiracy here. It's just absolutely clear that somebody pays for this narrative, this viewpoint to be broadcasted, right? To me, it's even believable that people in NATO and so on, that they are still completely behind Ukraine, because I've heard other people say that who have nothing to lose. So this narrative is still around, that there is an absolute disconnect, and that the people on the top of the globalist agenda actually believe their own lies and believe in this kind of, oh, Ukraine is about to win, just not quite yet approach. Because do you remember the the bridgehead thingy? Where's the bridgehead thingy? I showed it to you before, where he tries to actually say that, well, this bridgehead that we got on the eastern bank of the Dnieper River, that's a great success. Turns out, on the same day, December 14th, 2 days ago, Vladimir Putin also, he gave a speech. He had his 4-hour interview with online, and not online, sorry, with the media in Russia, and he answered for 4 hours questions by the public and by experts. And one of the things he talks about is that bridgehead. He says Kiev is sending its soldiers to die. Let's read this. So this is from Russia Today, right? So let's be media critic, right? Russia Today, the words of the Russian president. This is obviously what Russia Today and the Russian president wants to be believed, right? But this tells us a lot. So the Ukrainian leadership has grown desperate in the wake of its failed summer counteroffensive. Russian President Vladimir Putin told the press at his results of the year media event on Thursday. Putin spoke about an ongoing operation in which Kiev has sent its troops on a one-way trip to a tiny beachhead on the Russian-controlled bank of the Dnieper River in the Kherson region. So exactly what Kuleba talked about, foreign minister, right? And the foreign minister looks at this as a great success. Now, Mr. Putin Mr. Putin is happy with what he does. Kiev's actions essentially amount to sending troops to be exterminated. Well, this is also something that Alex Christoforou talks about a lot, and Alexander Mercury's. This is an insane position. So the Dnieper, this river, is a natural dividing line, right, between the two armies, and it is a defensible position more or less on both sides. Now the Ukrainians have this little bridgehead, and they think, oh, now we're this is going to let us then counter attack and stage this great counteroffensive that we've been waiting for 5-6 months now. But what it in actuality does is this really stupid strategic position, because you keep sending people and the Russians keep killing them, and then the Ukrainians keep sending more and the Russians keep killing them. But it's really easy to kill them, and Vladimir Putin even talks about that publicly, live on TV. He says, I don't even know why they do that, the president said, adding that the Ukrainian soldiers themselves call the operation in the area a one-way trip. According to Putin, the Ukrainian armed forces deliver reinforcement and supplies to the beachhead from the opposite side of the river bank with boats that are under the constant fire from Russian artillery. Of course they are. It is easy to shoot at them. Even at night, you can shoot at these boats because you have equipment that would show you who's going over, and the ones that you didn't hit on the water, you can then hit on the when they are on the other side of the river, because they're completely dependent upon supplies from the other side of the river. Right? This is a horrible position. Moscow's troops have turned the Ukrainian beachhead into a killing ground, Putin said, calling the development a tragedy for Ukraine. Of course, because Putin understands how horrible this is, and that these soldiers have like very little chance of survival, right? And actually, there is obviously these are suicide missions, and well, I mean, for as horrible as it is, but Mr. Putin thinks this is horrible. Of course, he could. Well, let's not go into this, but the language is also very different from what we see from the other side coming, right? But so Mr. Putin says this is actually good for us. Look at this or down here. Earlier, Ukrainian media outlets claimed that the Russians were unable to push the Ukrainians out of the area. According to Putin, Moscow does not even want to. I would say it plainly. And that's what he said on TV. It is advantageous for us that they, the Ukrainian armed forces, are just mindlessly throwing their personnel in there. He said, adding that he told the Russian general staff chief Valery Gerasimov not to launch any major attempts to reclaim lost territory in the area. I mean, this is pretty fantastic, right? So we have these two statements from these leaders. This one from Kuleba, where he tries to sell this as a victory, and obviously sees it as a victory, right? He and tries to portray it as such. And the other one by Vladimir Putin, who on live TV says this is good for us. Keep sending them, we keep annihilating them, and that's exactly what's happening now. What could be the case is that Putin is lying, right? And actually, they're losing, and they're just kind of trying to make up for the fact that they're losing. But just think about the strategic situation and think about the fact that we are not reading about Ukraine now finally using the bridgehead in order to counter invade, right, and to take back territory. That we just hear about the bridgehead for weeks and weeks. We hear about the bridgehead, just as we've heard in other situations about the Ukrainians having like still a tiny sliver of what was it like. There were several of these traps that the Russians were obviously setting up in order where the Ukrainians just kept sending troops, and the Russians just kept obliterating them because it was really easy. We are at a point where this information is like freely available, and where both sides basically give their side of the narrative, but it is clear to me that one side lives in a fantasy world. And the thing is that the horror, as horrible as war is, the one thing it does is it creates realities that are unignorable at some point. And right now, this is a very delusional text, I believe, and it runs right into the problem that nothing of this is manifesting, and that that you see this especially with the bridgehead story. And but the horrible part about this is that these ideas are probably the reason why the Ukrainians are still sending people into that bridgehead, because they believe their own narrative. These people actually believe that this bridgehead is gonna be, the stepping stone to victory, and that's why they keep sending these poor young men, and probably also young women by now, into their certain deaths. Um, and it is a tragedy. It is. Um, Maybe there's other things that we can learn from these texts that don't come to my mind right now, but to me it really shows that the things that these people want to be believed are probably also the things that they believe themselves. And I do think one of the two sides has a stronger military reason to believe in their view how things are going. What I can tell is whether this article is purely meant for propaganda purposes, but it seems to me that they do believe their own propaganda. They do. And that's why they don't change the tactics. And that's why the bloodshed continues instead of negotiations to end and to live in peace again.